Hello, dreamers, and welcome back to the show. This is the 328th episode of Killafornia Dreaming, and it is also the second part of a multi-part series that we are discussing, which is the 2013 death of 42-year-old husband, father of three, stepfather of one, Jason Rogers, by his wife, Rebecca. So if you haven't listened to part one, you'll want to listen to that first. It's episode number 327, and then come back to this. I'll go ahead and skip all the usual stuff in the beginning since I kind of skipped it in the first part also. But you know, Facebook, Instagram, Patreon, blah, 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 all that stuff. I'm kind of tired of saying it all. You guys all know. So let's go ahead and do a quick recap of part one, and then we will get back to where we left off. So in part one, we went over the background of this case. It's an older one that really didn't garner that much media attention at the time. It happened outside of Escambia County, Florida, which is in the Panhandle. And I couldn't even find an online obituary for Jason, the victim of our story, or on Find a Grave. And as far as articles, the thing is that because they were all like local stories, I have to subscribe for a free trial. And I might have mentioned at the end of part one, I've been kind of held up from working on these episodes because of tax season and whatnot, and going through all of the recurring payments that have been on all my various credit cards that I keep forgetting about. I've found that I'm subscribed to like a bunch of online newspapers and magazines when I do look up articles for the case and I accept a free trial, and I end up forgetting to cancel or unsubscribe. And I'm really disappointed in myself that I didn't pay more attention to recurring payments. Now that I'm in business, I need to be very careful about what I subscribe to and making sure I cancel things in a timely manner. But because I wasn't going to go too deep into this case itself, there was no trial. There was a guilty plea. I didn't have that much to work with to begin with, even if I did cover this case and not just the interrogation, you know. And so that just leaves me having to subscribe to things, and it's just not worth it right now. Not for this story. I don't really need to. I don't need any articles because most of them are biased in her favor anyway. But really, that interrogation that Rebecca did do is so full of nonsense, lies, and planning. It really struck me how the sentence she received was so minimal compared to other defendants in similar situations. She killed a guy and spent 2 years in prison. At the time that this happened within the community in which this family resided, it seemed like it felt fair to the casual observer. But not to me when I watched this interrogation. Well, actually, watching it because one of my listeners, Jen, out there in California, hi Jen, she texted me this morning and was like, "You're making me want to watch an interrogation video, and you know I don't like watching interrogation videos. You actually don't have to watch it because it's just an overview of the room, and she's just sitting there, and the two detectives are sitting next to her. There isn't any action that goes on. They do get up and they they do something actually really pretty ridiculous. I hate to spoil it too much, but they'll make her do a reenactment, and it's so silly that part is worth watching. But as for listening to her, you really just need to turn it on and listen. You don't have to sit there and stare at the screen. It's pretty clear what they're all saying. She's very clear. Her voice is one of those that just really like worms its way into your ear holes. You know what I mean? Anyway, we saw that in part one, how anxious Rebecca was to be able to tell her version of the story so that she could start to explain how she ended up shooting her husband twice in the back and once in the head in the bedroom closet of their family home. We heard her complain about being sore and how she became sore due to the fact that her husband had attempted to choke her to death. But other than some minor soreness that she only complains about when she's asked, she really has no significant injuries for her troubles. We heard Rebecca go through what happened that day leading up to the shooting. She outlined the pettiest of petty things that Jason apparently got so angry about over the course of the day. How he got mad that she supposedly embarrassed him at the restaurant that they went to go eat at. She then went into how she caught him smoking cigarettes like he's a teenager or something, and decided to ransack his vehicle. So she committed a illegal search, took his cigarettes, commandeered them, so illegal search and seizure, which amounts to theft, brought them inside the house, and apparently, in all casualness, said, quote, "Oh, I guess you went to the store and bought some cigarettes," and then proceeded to break them, destruction of property, and then threw them in the trash, tampering with evidence, and all those acts, which in any other context would have all been criminal. This set Jason off again into a tirade where he began to choke her out, telling her that he was the one that was going to go to jail tonight and that he was going to end this, culminating in Rebecca just giving up the fight for her life, accepted her fate, and prepared for death when he suddenly and apparently went to go get his gun. Now, that's how this all played out. I don't think I got into all of the details with each of those things that she will go on to discuss. I barely got into the interrogation itself. I'm like just a fraction of the way in. I can't even believe I put out a 2-hour episode yesterday over this stuff. I'm actually kind of disappointed because I wanted to force myself to condense this down, make it concise, and have it be no more than 2 parts because I don't like making you guys wait for me to get these out. But I will tell you this. I am taking a little bit of time away from the oil shop in the mornings so that I can do this. I am going to go to California this weekend for a couple of days. And when I get back, I think I'm going to continue taking my mornings so I can finish the series because I do need to get over on Patreon and put out some content over there as well. My goal is to put these 2 episodes out this week and then parts 3 and 4 next week. So fingers crossed that I can get all of that written. I considered getting some help from ChatGPT, but then I thought, nah, I'm not going to fall into that trap. I might use ChatGPT to change some of the things that I say and the way that I say them, but I don't really want to have a whole takeover and my show become completely like AI dependent. I see not a lot, but I see a few posts about some hosts that have leaned in on the AI thing and it's not going well. So I don't want to do that. I enjoy sitting here talking about this stuff, and I don't think Chat GPT or any other AI nonsense could really see things the way that you and I see things, you know? So anyway, getting back to Rebecca's story, Jason, after starting to choke her out, she, I guess, claims that she went limp and just relaxed and accepted her fate. But instead of continuing on with the already effective manner in which Jason was supposedly killing Rebecca with his bare hands, which he would have been able to do, and he would have been able to do so in a much more discreet manner considering his 2 youngest daughters are in the room next to them. But he decides, no, I'm not going to kill her this way, even though I'm halfway there and she's already giving up, and this is the best and quietest way to murder my wife. I'm instead going to get up, turn my back on my wife, give her the chance to fight or flight in order to get my gun, a much louder and more obvious and much more conspicuous way to murder her instead. And yet somehow she manages to have the time to suddenly wake up, recover, get up from her peaceful state of almost dying, as she did or will say that he was choking her for a while. She says that this goes on for a while. I don't think we've gotten to that part yet in the interrogation, but we will. She couldn't breathe, but she sure as shit got up, got her gun, and put 3 bullets into him before he ever had a chance to grab his, which he never did. In fact, dreamers, you are going to find out in the second part, or maybe even the third part, I don't know when it's going to come up because I talk too much, that Jason is not found with any kind of weapon near him. Instead, he's found shot and mortally wounded on the floor of their closet with a whole bunch of cash. Yeah, that's a detail that I'm ready to jump all over. But like I said, I'm getting ahead of us here. This is what happens when I watch an interrogation too much. I already know too much information and I end up spoiling things too early on, and I hate it when I do that, but I'm going to try not to. At least you know the biggest spoiler of all is that he dies and she goes to jail for 2 years. So we left off at the point in time where I theorized Rebecca supposedly, quote unquote, forgot to pick up her daughter Emma and her friend, resulting in her oldest daughter and her friends having to leave the home to get them. It's a fact that Rebecca literally laughed at when she said it in her interview, which only serves to prove that she even recognized how absurd this all sounds. And that effectively left Rebecca with the whole house cleared out of reliable witnesses so she would be able to shoot and hopefully kill Jason, only in front of her two youngest children instead of all of the children and their friends, which would have Rebecca being the only witness left to tell whatever story she wanted to in order to bend and twist the narrative into her favor. So we're going to pick it up from there, starting with how I feel Rebecca was attempting to make Jason's shooting not appear premeditated. So there are a couple of ways that I've identified as actions taken or words spoken by Rebecca to make it appear that none of what she did was a carefully planned execution. And what I see her doing is she's chosen a very casual way of presenting herself and her actions. Because what she's going to do is offer to go get the girls and then bring them back home. But then she's allegedly stopped by her oldest daughter and her friends like, "Oh no, Mom, don't worry about it. We'll go get them. You stay here and carry out your diabolical plan." What Rebecca did in this moment was she acted like she tried to remove herself from the situation with Jason. This fight started in the restaurant, spilled out into the interstate, and now they're all the way home, right? It would make sense for either Jason or Rebecca, mom or dad or both of them, to go pick up their kids or their daughter and their daughter's friend. But apparently, Rebecca's daughter was more than happy to do it for her instead, so she can stay home to continue arguing with Jason, right? This is what Rebecca said after she laughed about forgetting to pick up her own child. "Oh, did you text me back? Yeah, well, I didn't get it." So that was probably another lie. A text was sent to Rebecca to pick up the girls, but she claimed to have not gotten a response or she didn't get it. Convenient and coincidental, right? Yeah, sure. So Rebecca here is acting like she's not preparing to carry out a murder and make it appear she's all innocent. She's open to going and doing anything else but staying home and continuing to argue with her husband. So Rebecca, she tells them, "Well, come on, let's go get them." And they're like, "No, no, Mom, we'll go get them." And I said, "Well, I'll come with you." She says it just like that. The thing is, that's where Rebecca had nothing more to say. She left this now open for her being left behind at home with a very angry and volatile Jason and the two youngest kids, when it made the most sense for either Rebecca or Jason to do it. Put some time and space between them, go get their kids, bring them back, and then maybe everybody's had some time to calm down and they'll work this out. And you want to know why else it would have made more sense for either one or both of the parents to go and get the girls instead of the oldest daughter and her friends? You want to know why? I'll tell you why. The oldest daughter and her friends were drinking at home, at her home, which is fine. I don't have an issue with that at all. So if my daughter, who would be of drinking age, had been home with her friend, and I believe possibly a boyfriend or one of her friend's boyfriends, or just a guy who's a friend who's trying to see his way out of the friend zone, which is what I kind of think is going on. Whenever teenagers or even in adult relationships, whenever there's a guy that's kind of hovering with a group of girls, I always think like he probably has a crush on one of them, right? He's not there for his health, unless he's gay, then he might just be there for fun. But typically when a guy is lingering, he has a crush. But anyway, There's three of them. Their daughter, their daughter's friend, and a guy friend. They had all been home all evening on their own, helping to watch the little kids when Rebecca and Jason had gone out to dinner and they were drinking. I don't think she'd send them off to pick up more teenagers on their own after having been home all afternoon drinking. A parent should have come, and in addition to that, if Rebecca had been fighting with Jason that night to a point where she actually walked out of a restaurant, you'd think the wise thing would be to take a breather from each other, like I just said, and have one of them go get the kids instead of sending a carload of drinking young people to get the underage sibling and a friend. You see, this is what Rebecca said after she said, "Well, let me go with you," which there was apparently no response to that. She paused for a reaction from the officers, but again, there was none. So she said, and they ended up going, the three of them. Actually, their friend Johnny was there too. So it was Lisa, Kayla, and Johnny. And they were in the living room watching movies. There's two that are of age and they were drinking. Kayla was driving. So they went to go get McMillan and Emma. So it was just the two little ones at home with me. It is literally the perfect setup. When she said, or when Rebecca offered to go get her daughter and her friend, I actually don't think she offered at all. I think she told her daughter and her daughter's friend and the guy, Johnny, to go get the kids so she could clear the house out and make way for her shooting. That's exactly what I think she did. Completely and totally planned this out. 100%. She wanted all of them out of the house, and she stayed home with Jason and the 4-year-old and the one other child that's younger than that one. It's a setup, and that's just how I see it. You know what I mean, dreamers? I believe Rebecca set the entire night up to end up at home with her two young ones, and she conveniently, quote unquote, forgot to pick up her own daughter and her daughter's friend, like she was told to, like she was supposed to, like she had been reminded via text message to. She completely blew them off and sent drinking teenagers to go pick them up instead. Rebecca Rogers orchestrated this entire fight with Jason in order to make it look like she completely spaced on getting the kids, so that when she got home, she would have the older kids, all three of them, leave and go pick them up instead, setting it up for her to be able to shoot Jason to death without them being there in the house to bear witness to it all, because they would certainly be able to tell the true and most accurate account of what really happened in that house leading up to the shooting. And Rebecca simply couldn't have that. The older kids would have exposed her for the murderer that I believe her to be. The only other witness in the house left would be Rebecca, Jason, and the two children aged 4 and under. And this woman would make sure that the only one left to be able to create the self-defense narrative would be herself. Rebecca continued, quote, "My husband left, pissed at me, and we've been kind of arguing about smoking." Okay, here we go. The plot thickens, right? She's come up with something else petty to be pissed off at. But who is really the pissed off one? They've been arguing about smoking. Rebecca, the target of Jason's acts of domestic violence, allegedly. The one who is so fearful she'll end up pulling a gun and shooting him in the back. So afraid to even go face to face with the man that she's been married to and shares a bunch of daughters with. The battle she chooses to stand up to him over is his smoking cigarettes. The very thing that smokers use to calm themselves down. That's what she wants to fight over. Of all the things, I already mentioned this earlier in the last episode, how nonsensical this all is. Like I said before, if she fears Jason, she's not fucking with the cigarettes. I'm sorry. So she fucked with the cigarettes. Those darned cigarette streamers. You know, relationships are all about compromise, right? Smoking is a personal activity, and it's a personal issue, and it is a personal problem if one sees it that way. And this woman is a few years older than me, So she knows better by this time that there are just certain things that don't get better by fighting over it, and smoking is one of them. There are people who enjoy smoking and decide that the risk is worth the reward. That's their business. As a non smoker or someone who has successfully quit, you should be able to expect your significant other to smoke outside or not around you, and definitely not around the kids. But you really can't force or demand your husband or your wife to quit. So, what I'm seeing here is Rebecca picking a fight over probably Jason's worst habit, his smoking, or claiming that a fight was being picked. So, what that tells me that is if smoking is the worst thing that Jason is up to behind Rebecca's back, then you know what? This dude is doing a pretty darn good job for a husband and father. Nothing to pick on about his job. Nothing to pick on about their home or about their finances or about any other habit that bothers her. His parenting, him being a dad, nothing about hard drugs, nothing about being a liar, a cheater. He's providing, he's present, he's in the home. I mean, we don't know everything about the guy, but what we do know up to this point is Jason is about to be shot over getting upset over being embarrassed at a restaurant and having a smoking habit. I wish this woman had something worse to say about the guy, and then maybe I could understand or even relate to her anger and her frustration towards him, but there's nothing there. Because honestly, dreamers, if Rebecca had better dirt on him, she would use it. But smoking cigarettes was the best that she could come up with, because that could be corroborated. If he was cheating and she knew about it, and it could be proven by investigators, then she would 100% use that against him as a reason to blow his brains out. But no, she's got cigarettes. That's her story, and she's sticking to it. So after Jason was just about ready to jump out of the car in the interstate because he was so flippin' fed up with this woman over something she said at the restaurant, has now up and left pissed off over a cigarette debate. Rebecca wants us to believe that this guy will divert off the freeway, leave his house pissed off over the pettiest of pettiness, and all of that is what will lead up to him being shot in the back. That's her story, like I said. I guess that's it. So next, Rebecca says, quote, "We've kind of been arguing about him smoking. He's been trying to quit." Okay. This argument over cigarettes is all his fault for trying to quit, but not doing so well at it. So next she said, "I've quit like over a year ago," because she's the one who has to come out smelling like roses in the end, right? She has to be the one that has the most positive light shined on herself at all times. Otherwise, the self-defense nonsense is going to fall apart. So they fight and argue because she's better and more successful at quitting. And fights ensue over the fact that he might be struggling with it more than she did. And her actions will prove my point here in a moment. She's a woman who will pick fights of convenience. She needed a story in order to commit a justifiable homicide, and her seemingly decent, hardworking father of four husband has to somehow be deserving of being shot to death on this night. So then she said, "We've been kind of arguing about him smoking. He's been trying to quit. So he's trying, and you fight him because he's struggling. Yeah, if I was married to her, I'd be smoking more than nicotine, I'm pretty sure." She continued, "I quit like over a year ago, and he said he'd quit, but he's been doing it behind my back." Again, hardly the most traumatic thing a husband could do behind your back, but I guess it's all relative, huh? "I've been smelling it and stuff. Well, he left, and I've been smelling it more often, and he actually didn't. He came back, and there was a pack of cigarettes in the car." So now she's invading his privacy, searching his car like she's the cigarette police. This woman would drive me mad too. So, I brought them in and I said, "Oh, I guess you went to the store and bought cigarettes." Dreamers, do we want to go over a few things we as wives or as girlfriends might actually have to say? Because I 100% know that this woman did not just say, "Oh, I guess you went to the store to buy cigarettes." If this was a fight that I'd pick and my husband had a history of domestic violence, if he's put his hands on me in the past, if he's prone to choking me out, if he's got access to firearms, I'd probably choose my words wisely too. A fearful woman might say something like that she described. "Oh, I guess you went to the store." But at that point, chances are a fearful wife would probably say nothing. In fact, I'd be relieved that he went to the store. I'd be relieved that he's trying to calm his nerves with nicotine rather than putting his hands on me, right? That would be a moment where you could take a breath and be glad that he didn't put hands on. But no, she decides to confront him. And she had to march her little busybody outside to the truck, get in there, search around, bring those cigarettes into the house, wave them around in his face while confronting him about his lies and his betrayal. "You were going to quit, but not really quitting, and you suck at everything, including quitting. You can't even quit properly, you're so dumb. Where'd these cigarettes come from? The nicotine fairy just came down and bing, brand new pack of cigarettes for you?" Hell, I'd even go buy him a carton and use them as bribes around the house if he needed them that badly, if I was so fearful of his rage and him acting out physically and attacking me. I wouldn't sit there and call him out on his smoking if I was that afraid of him. So, Rebecca here's bossing Jason around, attempting to deprive him of his civil liberties, searched his vehicle without a warrant, seized his cigarettes without his consent, takes them from him. So, like I said, committing a theft. If I went into someone's car and took their pack of cigarettes, a creative district attorney could very easily roll that up into a felony charge if they tried hard enough, especially if the car was broken into. But they're married, so technically this is community property, and it's so petty. But yeah, if you open someone's car door and there's like a $1,500 MacBook on the seat, that's attempted theft. If you so much as pick it up off the seat, then you're cooked. So you see here, Rebecca's violating Jason's rights and freedoms and attempting to push her morality onto him. Yet she somehow made him out to be the bad guy here. Just because you're married to the guy doesn't mean you run every aspect of his life. Well, technically, ladies, there's ways around it, right? We know how to handle men. But I guarantee this woman probably read him the riot act. She didn't just demurely go, "Oh, I see you went to the store to buy cigarettes." She didn't go from making that claim, yet astute observation, to violently shooting him in the back. If they were fighting, and that's a big if, because I don't even know if I even believe there was ever any fight, because none of what Rebecca is saying is worth all of this drama, culminating with guns being drawn. If they were fighting, it would usually be the domestic abuser picking the fight, not the one being abused. It's the opposite of what people do when they're filled with fear. They don't go poking the bear. So then Rebecca next said, quote, "So honestly, I think he was just agitated because he gets agitated on the weekends because he smokes. I think he's smoking at work. He's not smoking on the weekends with me. So I broke his cigarettes. And that's what made him come after me." That's it, dreamers. That's it. She said that this big, tall, abusive man who's been mad at her all afternoon over the most trivial of things, she decided to not only confiscate his cigarettes, she folded the pack in half and broke them. Now, the last thing she said was, "And that's what made him come after me." Now, she did pause again. She said all of that very slowly for added dramatics. I probably said it faster because I'm like really worked up about this lady, but she was very measured in the way she said things. And I wish I could be more like that, but I'm too like annoyed to fully get into the manners and ways that she said it. So if you really want to hear her, you can go and listen yourselves. But like I said, she did pause several times. She said all of what I just quoted her as saying very slowly, and for added dramatics, she paused for 4 seconds because she was getting ready for the biggest act of aggression that she will accuse Jason of thus far. The very next thing she said was, and it was just like this, is how she said it. Quote, and that's what made him come after me. Pause, 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 pause. And he grabbed me by the neck. And just as she said that, the detective finally spoke up. After she said that she'd been grabbed by the neck, he said something. Now, if I was talking to a girlfriend and she told me that she was grabbed by the neck by her husband, I would immediately become very, very upset and angry and emotional. I don't think I've ever had a close friend who was being physically abused by a boyfriend or a husband in that manner. But I've certainly had friends where I don't like the way their husbands or boyfriends treat them, and that causes me to immediately not like him for it. I might tolerate him so I can keep my friendship, but I reserve the right to complain about him when it's warranted. And it goes both ways. It's part of the foundations of a lot of friendships. We vent about our significant others to our best friends. It's a safe place to freely complain and shit talk, right? Anyway, my point is, if I was talking to a girlfriend and we were having a conversation along the same lines as these detectives are having in this moment with Rebecca, and she's about to reveal that Jason grabbed her by the neck, like I said, I would become very upset and emotional. I would find it to be so alarming, and I would start wanting to know exactly what happened and when we're going to get the restraining order. But these two detectives, you know, Rebecca's been talking to them here now for about 15 or 20 minutes, and she'd been waiting all day to tell this story about the neck grab. And when she finally gathers up the nerve to try and sell this narrative, she says it very plainly and very clearly, and that's what made him come after me. Insert awkward pause, expecting dramatics and reactions, but gets nothing but crickets. And he grabbed me by the neck. The detective damn nearly talked over Rebecca to ask his next question. He wasn't even listening. He was just waiting for his turn to speak so he could ask the question he had already formulated in his mind. Before she even finished getting the last word of her sentence out, the detective quickly chimed in and said, now, when this happened, where were y'all when you broke the cigarettes? He didn't even ask about the neck grab. He went back to this bullshit about the breaking of the cigarettes. So without even so much as flinching when Rebecca said that she had been grabbed by the neck, totally ignoring the most threatening move Jason has made against her thus far throughout this evening, of him getting more and more pissed off at this woman, the detective asked where they were at when she allegedly broke his cigarettes in half. I mean, that, if they could corroborate that, if her story could be proven, if this in fact happened, then, and they find those broken cigarettes somewhere in the house, then okay, maybe that's an aspect that they can believe. But they're sitting across from this woman, and I'm sure they're looking at her neck and they're not seeing anything. I don't know what kinds of marks get left. I guess it depends on how much your skin reacts to being grabbed like that. If it turns red, there could be bruises. Sometimes we've seen hand marks, like fingers, outlines of fingers on skin, you know? So they're probably seeing nothing, because if that had truly happened, if she was in a way that he choked her to a point where it caused her physical damage, I'm pretty sure it's policy to transport her to the hospital. But she didn't ask to go. All she says is she's sore. So when it comes to the cigarettes, I don't know if they actually ever were able to corroborate the story. The investigation into this wasn't going to go on for very long, and it would end up in a of no contest, so there's no testimony. Rebecca would have had to have taken the stand in order to justify her shooting of Jason in the back. And despite the reputation that Florida juries have garnered in the past or the few couple of years leading up to this 2013 shooting, which was in the wake of two really huge high profile cases, Casey Anthony and George Zimmerman, to me, some of that kind of plays into all of this. I don't think that law enforcement had a whole lot of faith in the jury system. And maybe that's why these two detectives are kind of sitting there like, ho hum, we don't give a shit. We'll just, the evidence will speak for us and she could just do whatever because a jury's going to acquit her anyway, right? Why don't we go back and visit those two cases? Because once we go back and remember when those actually happened, and put it kind of into a context of what was going on in Florida at this time, maybe we can understand why Rebecca's case happened the way that it happened. Let's talk about George Zimmerman and Casey Anthony for a few minutes. It won't be long, but I do think it's a little bit relevant to an extent. Just hear me out, okay? I promise. I'm going to make sense, sort of. And to be honest, I was a little bit excited to talk to you about this because perhaps we will find Rebecca's inspiration having come from one or both of those very high profile trials out of the state of Florida where this case took place. Could Rebecca have formulated a plan based on what she learned about standing her ground as a direct result of the Zimmerman case? Not necessarily Casey Anthony, but George Zimmerman? It, I think, is worth something to consider. And let me go ahead and remind you of those two cases very quickly. And maybe you'll put it together and see this case the way that I do. So if you happen to be living under a rock between the years of 2008 and 2013, Casey, quote unquote, tot mom Anthony is the Florida mom whose almost 3-year-old daughter, Kaylee, went missing in June of 2008. Casey famously failed to report her child missing for 31 days, opting instead to utilize her own resources, as she put it, to try to find her daughter instead. Casey was ultimately charged with first-degree murder and was actually facing the death penalty if convicted. Kaylee's body was found some months after her mother was charged with her murder. The trial began in 2011, and Casey was ultimately acquitted of all the charges related to Kaylee's death in July of that year, only being convicted of lying to police and some earlier check fraud charges, if I'm remembering correctly. Casey Anthony had held the title of Most Hated Mom in America for quite some time. I think for the next decade following her acquittal, at least until the world got introduced to one Lori Vallow. So, putting it into context, Rebecca here in our story today would have shot and killed her husband a little more than 2 years after Casey Anthony's acquittal. But let's now turn our attention to Mr. George Zimmerman, because this is where Florida's infamous stand your ground law took center stage. Again, if you're still occupying property under a rock, I'll remind you that Zimmerman was the loose cannon, overzealous, self-proclaimed, wannabe, and armed neighborhood watch on patrol guy. Shot and killed a 17-year-old resident of the neighborhood who had every right to be and walk exactly where he was gunned down at by this asshole. This young man's name was Trayvon Martin. He, this 17-year-old Trayvon, was armed with a deadly can of Arizona tea and the highly lethal, apparently, bag of Skittles. In that case, this story, that shooting all began a mere 6 months after Casey's acquittal for murder. So Florida and the rest of us moved on pretty quickly because, many thought that Casey Anthony got away with murder. So now they have a new villain to focus on for the time being. Just 6 months after the most infamous mom managed to beat a murder rap, this guy was like, hold my bullshittery. This is how to murder in Florida and get away with it. Invoke your right to stand your ground. And as sure as the day is long, 2 years and a handful of days after Casey was acquitted by a Florida jury of murder, a brand new Florida jury did it again and acquitted Zimmerman of murder as well. And you might not exactly remember what day that happened, but the Zimmerman acquittal came down on July 13th, 2013, just 1 month and 4 days before Rebecca here shot Jason in an alleged act of self-defense. Am I insinuating that Rebecca saw how the Zimmerman trial played out? She saw how easy it was for Mr. Neighborhood Watch to just randomly and wantonly gun down an unarmed black teenager on the streets of Florida? How easy it was to claim self-defense and the right to not have to back down in the face of an Arizona tea and a bag of Skittles? And to actually be able to sell that story to a Florida jury. Rebecca, I fully believe, saw what worked for George Zimmerman and decided that, hey, I can make that work for me too. And she probably thought it was going to be even easier for her since this wouldn't just be some rando stranger on the street. She would be shooting this husband of hers who was much bigger than her and had spent years abusing and instilling the fear of God into her, allegedly. I think Rebecca saw this as her get out of jail card, this self-defense. She saw it work for Zimmerman, why not her? She had been shown twice in so many years that juries in Florida not only give pretty sympathetic moms who claim abuse tickets out of jail, they'll also buy a bogus self-defense story, hook, line, and sinker. And with that, Rebecca took a page from both of those trials and set her own murder plot into motion. And for me, if what I'm saying is in fact true, that would make her even worse than both Casey Anthony and George Zimmerman combined, since I don't believe either one of them actually planned on murdering Kaylee and Trayvon on the day that they were killed. On a side note, I do have, over the years, I have developed a somewhat unpopular opinion regarding Casey Anthony. I do think that she is responsible for Kaylee's death. I didn't believe her father abused her, though I haven't looked into it or thought about it in recent years. So opinions might have changed, evidence may have come about, things have possibly happened that have corroborated those accusations, but I don't know anything about it as of right now. But at the time, I thought that was just Casey's attorney's red herring to distract away from Casey and her abysmal reputation at the time there in Florida. And really, frankly speaking, around the country and the world, I mean, she was the most hated mom in America. But I believe her own mom, Cindy Anthony, could have been a strong contender for that title when analyzing the way she handled Casey growing up, the way that she treated her, the way that she controlled her, the way that Cindy manipulated the optics of when it came to her, quote, perfect little daughter and their perfect little family. All of that came about for me when I learned Cindy covered up and lied to everyone about Casey being pregnant. I'm even hearing that Casey didn't want to have the baby, that there was this potential that she was actually sexually assaulted at a party when she might have been passed out or inebriated, or she could have even been drugged. She then finds out that she's pregnant. She doesn't know who the dad is. she doesn't want the baby, but I don't know if this is true or not. But what I've heard is her mom, Cindy, forced her to have the baby. I was just recently told that by a listener. Like I said, I don't know if it's true, but it does seem possible knowing what I know about Cindy Anthony. What I did think at the time, and to an extent what I still think, is that Cindy covered up and lied to everyone about Casey being pregnant. She lied about Casey being a high school dropout. She was now a pregnant teenager. And she decided unilaterally that the best way to cover up the shame of all of that was just to show up one day with a brand new baby and pretend like Kaylee just manifested somewhere, somehow, in some time and space continuum in order to spare herself the embarrassment and humiliation of her daughter's failures. And the only reason why I think Cindy would carry around so much shame over Casey's behavior is because it would have been a direct reflection of her own failures and her own insecurities as a mother. And I believe Cindy intended to use Kaylee and grandmotherhood as sort of a redemption for herself. Kaylee was going to be Casey 2.0. It was going to be her second chance to try to do things right. And you know why I think that? I think that because of my own mom's bitter, anger, hostile feelings towards me. And that being the complete and total opposite of how my mom acted and felt towards my own daughter when she was born. Casey's experience with her mom feels really similar to my own. But like I said, I don't know that to be a fact. That's kind of sort of what I've put together in the very puzzling dynamic of that Anthony family out there. So anyway, my point is that I firmly believe Rebecca Rogers took what she learned from the George Zimmerman trial and the acquittal from the month before she shot her husband and came up with what she thought would be a foolproof plan to get away with killing him. Casey Anthony and George Zimmerman were studies in case law for Rebecca. She had years of media coverage that she was bombarded with. She was picking up on tips on how to murder and get away with it. And she took that and applied it to her own life. And while she didn't get off as scot-free as Casey and George did, it certainly worked in her favor. And it wasn't just that the state didn't have a good case against Rebecca. I think they did, or at least they would have, or had a better one, had the investigators dug a little bit deeper and did what I wrote in the title of this episode. Spent a little more time reading between the lines of what Rebecca was saying to them in this interrogation. Like I said in the beginning, I think that they decided Jason getting shot in the back would speak for itself. And perhaps that, combined with the state of Florida being a little apprehensive when it came to going to trial and their faith in the jury system in Florida having faltered, things just kind of lined up well for Rebecca when it came to her having to take her turn and face up to some murder charges. Faith in the Florida justice system was at an all-time low for not just the state of Florida, but for all of us looking on. And Rebecca Rogers was able to capitalize on that handsomely. Okay, dreamers, we seriously need to get back to the interrogation. You know, you guys get so sidetracked here, I swear. We are only 13 minutes into this thing. I have to keep us on track every single time. Like, seriously? Come on now. So I left off with the detective asking where Rebecca was when she broke Jason's cigarettes. Remember, he asked that right after she said that he grabbed her neck. So he clearly did not give a shit. So Rebecca replied, well, I had them in the dining room area where the china cabinet is, and I had stepped on them. when I went back out to the car and then I came back in and they were on the counter. So I didn't damage them. I thought I had damaged them, but I didn't. Ridiculous, streamers. This whole statement. I sounded like Judge Judy when I said that, huh? Ridiculous. She always is like that. I like that show. I watched a lot of Judge Judy during COVID, so that was good times, huh? This whole statement that Rebecca's making before anything, I want to know why. I want to know why this woman is in an ongoing argument with her husband and she's going in and out of the house to his vehicle. I want to know why and what she was doing, but we'll never know. And what is going on with these cigarettes? What is happening? How is she smashing this pack of cigarettes? She said she broke them. And then what? She threw them on the dining room floor and stomped them, yet they were completely undamaged. What were they friggin' made out of? Reinforced steel? For me, it just continues to add to the unbelievability of her story. And then her next statement is just as bullshitty as when she said, "Oh, I guess you went to the store and bought some cigarettes," as she followed that up with this gem. "So I took them off the counter and I took them out of the pack and I broke them. And I said, 'I'm breaking your cigarettes.'" Yeah, she paused again. That was one of her pauses. That's her pause for them to say something, to which she received nothing. No reaction, no words, no nothing. So she repeated, "I'm breaking your cigarettes." Pause, pause, pause. Which I did do that. And I guess it set him off. She guesses? Yeah, you dumb diddy dum dum dummy. I guess if you and your husband are at this point of fighting over stupid stuff in public in front of your kids, getting choked out throughout their marriage and threatening each other's lives over this, yeah, honey, I guess destroying the one vice that this guy has to calm and settle his nerves just might set him off a little bit. So yeah, she picked a pretty good launching point for him to become homicidally rage-filled. Smashing his cigarettes, that's all it took. Wow. I really have no words beyond that, but actually I do. So she said she did do that, and she guesses that it set him off. And I cannot stress enough how unbelievable it is that you would provoke someone in this way that you're supposedly terrified of, scared to death of, so much so that you actually went out and bought a gun just to make sure that if he came after you, that you could shoot him. Apparently, this guy comes after her backwards because she shot him in the back. To me, the fact that Rebecca had the nerve to do that to his cigarettes, I don't even want to say the courage, just the nerve to do that, means a couple of things to me. One is that she's not afraid of him, and or he's not physically abusive or threatening in any way, shape, or form. And or she's actually the abusive one. I read into this action of destroying his cigarettes as being an act of anger, aggression, and control. The only thing we've seen out of Jason throughout this entire night is a guy who just goes with the flow, right? Want to have a date night? Sure. Want to go to the Outback? Sounds good to me. Can the girls have a sleepover? Why not? I don't care. This guy is the most chill guy in the world. And so what the fuck? He has a couple of smokes? Who cares? Apparently Rebecca does. Or at least she needed to pick on that one thing, you know? My mom was a lot like that. There was very few things that my mom had to pick on me about. I wasn't a bad kid. I didn't give her a lot of trouble. I wasn't boy crazy when I was a teenager. I wasn't smoking, wasn't using drugs. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't great at school, but I definitely was trying to get through it so I could hurry up and make it to adulthood and try to get on with my life. But I wasn't a terrible kid and I didn't grow into a terrible adult either. But the one vice that I had throughout most of my life was soda. I love drinking soda. I love Coke, Pepsi. I drank cherry Coke and cherry Pepsi as a kid and into my teenage years. I stopped when I got pregnant, but after pregnancy, I started drinking Diet Coke, and then Coke Zero came out, and I was like all over the Coke Zero. Coke Zero's my thing, but my mom picked on my consumption of Coke Zero until the day she frickin' died. That was the one thing that she could pick on because, well, I did start drinking in my 30s, but she didn't know about it. I hid that from her. However, there was nothing else. I didn't do anything else. But like Rebecca here, she doesn't have anything else to pick on, you know? So she finds that one thing that might be somewhat socially unacceptable. I sit here and people will be like, "Oh, diet soda is so bad for you. It's worse than regular soda." But yeah, I don't like drinking regular soda now. It's been so many years. When I taste a Coke or a sugary drink, it makes me even more thirsty and it's too sweet and I don't like it. So yeah, maybe diet soda or Coke Zero is worse, but it's the one freaking thing I have in life that brings me any kind of joy. Well, except for my kid and my dogs, but you know what I mean. God, that's what I see Rebecca doing here. And it reminds me, Rebecca's relationship with Jason's cigarettes are very much like my mom's relationship with my addiction to Coke Zero. Anyway, getting back to it, even the whole scene at the restaurant, how Rebecca claimed that Jason got all bent out of shape and got his underwear up into a bunch over supposedly being embarrassed because she asked that couple that they ran into about whether or not they had kids, which would admittedly be a perfectly normal thing for the parents of 4 daughters to bring up to someone that they're meeting for the first time. It's perfectly normal. Hey, how are you guys doing? Yeah, we have a rare chance to go out tonight. It's hard to find time with 3 kids in the house, and the oldest is visiting, so she's babysitting. So we got to get away for a couple of hours. Do you guys have kids? And then the conversation carries on from there. Now, I don't think that Rebecca made this whole thing up out of whole cloth. I think that something happened that caused some kind of embarrassment. And I think it was either one of two things. Either Rebecca did or said something that was so out of pocket that Jason had no choice but to say something to her, and that's what set her off. I don't know what that could have possibly been. She seems to have some issues, clearly, because later on she'd go home and shoot her husband in the back. So obviously something's going on with this lady. And there are plenty of things that a significant other could say or do in public that would be embarrassing to their partner. And while most people wouldn't necessarily cause a scene in a restaurant, because remember, Rebecca was the one who walked out to the parking lot, not him. If she was the one who caused the issue and Jason was the one who got so upset about, wouldn't he have been the one to want to walk out? That's an opinion. But honestly, I think she not only walked out pissed off, I think she stormed out pissed off. And she was either angry that he called her out on something that she did that was completely embarrassing, or he did or said something that embarrassed or upset her. I cannot bring myself to believe that Rebecca asked this couple about kids and that caused Jason to fly into a state of humiliation and shame that set this whole evening off into the trajectory in which it ended up with him shot to death. She embarrassed him and she ends up shooting him. Yeah, I find her leaving the restaurant to again be an act of aggression and control. So it has me asking that question. Who is the aggressive and controlling spouse? And while this all lines up with my opinions on the whole breaking of the cigarettes, think about that in the context in which it happened. say that there's some measure of truth to what Rebecca is saying here, that the whole evening spiraled into a fatal confrontation. When they got home from the restaurant, after she said he pulled off the interstate and got out of the car and told her to drive, the most likely way I see that happening is Rebecca being completely off the rails over there in the passenger seat, that it caused Jason to have to pull over in order to be able to exit the vehicle so he can put some space between himself and his irate wife. This to me felt more like an act of trying to de-escalate the situation on his part. If the person driving is truly enraged, and on top of that, he's a controlling domestic abuser, I think that that person is likely to take their frustration out on their driving. I think the person who wants to be calm and wants to de-escalate the situation would safely pull over, especially an abuser with an abuser in the car. The person who has the violent tendencies, I believe, and I've read, is the one who's likely to turn the driving into a means of putting fear and intimidation into their partner. Later on, Rebecca's going to say that Jason was the one who was hollering at her that he's going to jail tonight and he's putting an end to this once and for all. Those are not the words of someone who is angry behind the wheel and that's willing to pull over and let the person he abuses take over the driving. I just don't see it happening that way, just based on studies, personal experience, and things that I've seen and heard in domestic violence situations. So yeah, even though this woman just said that he grabbed her by the neck, and the details she will go on to place around that are questionable at best, to me, Rebecca's the one who had been acting, behaving, and speaking aggressively. All of her actions point to her being the instigator, while the whole thing about the neck grab is quite dismissible to me anyway. Not only because the detectives dismissed it, and not only because she ended up shooting Jason in the back, but mainly because of the story she had to tell surrounding this alleged choking. None of it is believable or realistic, and you'll see that when I tell you what she said a little bit later on in her interview. So Rebecca's story here about the cigarettes continued. I was right in front of the china cabinet walking back from the garbage can after I broke them, and he came out from the back hallway coming down. The detective asked in the most uninterested monotone voice ever. From your bedroom? Yeah, well, I don't know if he was with the girls or what. All the bedrooms are back there, but yeah, he had come down the hallway and grabbed me right in front of the china cabinet. The detective, I guess, didn't even hear her say that he grabbed her by the neck because he asked, "Where did he grab you at?" Rebecca replied, "My neck." And he repeated, "On the neck." And she kept going. And he had me down on the floor and he was choking me and I couldn't breathe. And he was saying, "I'm going to jail tonight." My little one was there. She came up on it and I'm like, "Oh my God." The officer asked which kid it was. Rebecca replied, "JC, my 4-year-old. She went back crying." So yeah, apparently the 4-year-old is seeing whatever's happening in the lead up prior to the shooting. And I say whatever was happening because I don't necessarily believe that Jason was choking her out because she broke his cigarettes and threw them in the trash. However, I do think that there might be some truth to her admitting that her daughter witnessed something. But it only works to her benefit, you know. Rebecca's benefit, I mean. That's a witness that might be able to corroborate some parts of her story, just depending on how articulate this 4-year-old actually is. But even then, stories from children aren't considered to be reliable. But there is something to be said for some of the things that they do say. Dare I recall Josh and Susan Powell? Remember that story? Their boys? At least the older one said something that was very incriminating. He said several things, but he also said some things that didn't make sense either when he was questioned about what happened to his mom. At the time, and the older boy was named Charlie, he was 4 at the time, and he had a younger brother named Braden who was only 2. So the 4-year-old was able to say some things. Some of the things didn't make sense, but enough of it made enough sense to know that his dad killed his mom and got rid of her somewhere in the vastness of the state of Utah. We still don't know where that woman is at. And I don't know if we ever will know. Anyway, as I was saying, the older son in that case with the Powell family, Charlie, he said things that were very incriminating about his dad, but he was not considered a reliable witness. But they believed him 1000%. And I did too. You can't really affect an arrest based on the stories of a preschooler, you know. And yeah, that's why I think Rebecca here in our story today got rid of the kids that could tell a reliable story. You know what I mean? Rebecca will admit more about what her 4-year-old witnessed later on. I think Rebecca will admit to things that don't really help her case, even admitting to things that are detrimental to her case. But I think she did so without really thinking about what she was saying first. She will say a couple of things that will have the detectives actually kind of stunned to a point where they don't even know what to say. I'm telling you that there is much more woven into this hour-plus long interview that are so easy to miss if you're not fully paying attention to what this woman is saying in this interview room. So a moment ago, I quoted Rebecca as saying that Jason had her down on the floor and that he was choking her and she couldn't breathe, right? Well, just about 21 seconds later, after she said that her 4-year-old went back into the room crying, Rebecca stated, quote, "But he had me," and then she started gesturing with her hand a little bit. I was like this. His back would have been towards the hallway and he was choking me. And I mean, I got to the point where I was fighting him. And dreamers, I love this part so much. And she literally actually said this, okay? She said, quote, "I got to the point where I was fighting him. And I guess that's where I got that I don't know." And she gestured to the tiny injury on her hand. Fighting with her 6'5" tall husband, nearly a foot taller than she is, on top of her, having her down on the ground, choking her out so much so that she couldn't breathe. And this is just hours later, and she never went to the hospital. She wasn't taken by ambulance anywhere to be treated for this fight to the death. And the only thing she has to physically show these officers is a small injury to her hand. And the fact is, these detectives actually suspect that it's a wound caused by the firing of the type of gun that she admitted to shooting Jason with. My dogs are barking right now at something. I hope it's not picking up on the... Let me rewind and listen. Hold on. I can kind of hear it. I don't want to re-record it, so ignore them. So anyway, back to this injury on her hand. A little later on, they're going to tell Rebecca that they're pretty sure they know where that injury came from, that it had to do with the way that she held the gun when she fired it and it caused this wound. She's going to try to dispute that theory, but to me, her efforts to do so kind of worked against her. And I'll talk more about that when we get to it. But yeah, this is my favorite part of her interview, and how it just goes to show that when these suspects are trying to make up a story, that they have no idea what it means to actually experience this kind of event in real life. They end up describing scenes that they've seen on TV or in the movies. The dramatics are so like way over the top. And Rebecca really goes there because the fact of the matter is that this didn't happen this way. A lot of this that she's talking about never happened. And she needed to pretend that it did. And the only thing that she had to draw from is what she's seen in Hollywood productions. So after she pointed out the injury that she guessed that she supposedly got trying to fight off Jason's alleged choking, she goes and says, this is great. I love this so much. And then I just kind of felt like I gave up. You know what I mean? I've always heard people like that feeling that where you think you're just gonna die. You know, where you just let go. Right there, one of the detectives kind of went, You don't fight? And she's pausing here. I'm not pausing because I'm stammering or stuttering. She's pausing. This is exactly how she says it. I just kind of felt like I gave up. You know what I mean? I've always heard of people like that feeling where you think you're just gonna die. Ha ha ha. You know, where you just let go. That was the that the detective made. That's all he had to say. When she was like, I was about to meet my maker, and he's like, huh. It cracks me up. It's actually worth listening to. It's so stupid. Anyway, she said one more thing after the detective grunted and said, and you don't fight? You just let go, right? You don't fight. She kept pausing and forming what she was going to say into a question to try and get some kind of response out of these two. But they're just so not interested in hearing her lies that they can't even fake it. And what's worse, Rebecca is beginning to realize it too. And she is going to start to have an increase in exasperated breathing. And she will take on a more defensive tone as she can see that they are not buying her story at all. This would have gone so much better for Rebecca if she wasn't so confident that her story would have been accepted at face value. She thought she would just be able to go in there and she would just flip her pretty blonde hair, well, dyed blonde hair, and bat her stupid gray-green eyes and charm these detectives into believing her story because she's just a victim of domestic violence and he did this to her and he choked her, and they were going to be like, oh, okay, we're so sorry. We'll totally believe you. And Jason clearly deserved to get shot in the back for what he did to you. No, they weren't going to. That's what she thought she was going to get, and that's not happening for her. This woman clearly was watching the wrong kind of TV when getting tips on how to murder your husband and make it look like it was his fault. And I mean, okay, so she said that she's always heard that people just, they stop fighting and they just give up. What the fuck? And can we just talk about whatever the hell she means when she said that? That she's always heard of people like feeling that when you think you're just gonna die, you know, where you just let go and you don't fight. What in the holy freaking cheese balls is this woman flipping talking about? You just give up and stop fighting? You want to know what my first and second thoughts were when she said that? Because I always have more than one. I feel like this is perhaps the exact feeling that people had. This is what I think she might be talking about. This is the feeling that people, for example, who decided to jump from the burning World Trade Center buildings, rather than trying to fight their way through the smoke and flames, they chose to jump. I mean, doesn't that seem like the kinds of thoughts that you would have as you're standing there on the precipice of death, looking out from one of the highest, if not the highest at the time, points overlooking New York City and really what feels like the entire world. And you're looking at what you think heaven might be. And it's up there, out there somewhere. From that gaping hole in the side of the building where you were just sitting at your desk or getting your coffee or talking about the workday with your colleagues. And you have the choice to either burn or jump. And when you decide to make that leap to your death, is that the moment this dumbass bitch, Rebecca, seems to think is where this person facing certain death decides to just give up, where you're just gonna die? I mean, is she being so serious right now? That's what she thinks that moment consists of. These people, those who had the most impossible decision to make, didn't give up and jump. And it's kind of irritating that she would frame what those who were on that edge of death as giving up, that they're just gonna die. Those are her words, dreamers. She thinks that when you're made to face your own death, that this is them giving up because they're just gonna die. She trivialized that poignant moment for these individuals who jumped instead of burned in order to dial up the dramatics for her lies and her bullshit story of survival. To you and me, and most everybody else, who even had a sliver of sensibilities and empathy, could see that those people's final moments on earth were moments that they took back from their murderers. They took control over their death and left this world on their own terms, not on the terms of those who crashed those planes into those buildings. They didn't just let go, as Rebecca put it. They grabbed hold and refused to let go. It's painful to even think about the last thoughts that those people who jumped, thinking about their loved ones and their children, their husbands, their wives, hoping that it just ends fast. And we hope and pray that they never knew what happened, that their body would descend and their souls would ascend, that they would just say a prayer, took a breath, and pretended to fly. And this twat, Rebecca, called it giving up because she has no idea what it means to almost die. Nobody wants to let go. It goes against everything in our nature to survive. And that's the biggest pile of bullshit I think we'll ever hear come from this woman. Well, actually, no, there's plenty more. I'm sorry. She just pissed me off when she made those moments and took them and tried to appropriate them to her own lame, bullshitty situation here. It just, to no end, it just ticks me off. All right, let's take a deep breath together. Ready? Inhale and exhale. All right. So after Rebecca claimed to have reached the point of having the life choked out of her, and she made up her mind that she was going to give up the fight for her life and just let her body and soul go to its final destination in this profound moment of serenity and clarity, she next said this gem. And I was like, stop. You know, I was trying to tell him to stop. OMG, dreamers. Wow. The way she described this was so lame. She put all the dramatics she had in her stupid little mind, body, and soul into this long, drawn out stop in a voice and a tone in which she seems to think it sounds like when you're being choked. And what's even stupider is the fact that she just freaking said she gave up. She was just ready to die. And yet now she's saying she's trying to tell him to stop. That was actually the next thing that she said. I was trying to tell him to stop right after she said she was giving up. Make up your mind. Are you letting go? Are you ready to die? Are you still fighting? Do you want him to stop? Which is it? Well, anyway, after she said that she was trying to get him to stop, apparently Jason had this brilliant response where Rebecca next described him as saying, "I'm going to jail tonight and I don't even know what he said. I know it was not nice, you know." She literally said that. "I shit you not," she said that next. Rebecca stated to these detectives, quote, "He said, 'I'm going to jail tonight and I don't even know what he said. I know it was not nice, you know." Honestly, dreamers, I think Rebecca really thought she was going to get some kind of reaction out of these investigators that are interviewing her, but they're just not biting. So when she pauses for them to give her some kind of verbal response or sympathy or some sort of, "Oh my God, you're so lucky you got to shoot him and make it out of this alive" reaction from them, it just gets so awkward from not only the silence, but the fact that she can't and won't ever be able to come up with any kind of meaningful dialogue that she ever had with Jason that night that they fought each other for their lives, supposedly. Maybe she's drawing blanks because of the supposed trauma of the moment, or at the very least, she hopes they'll chalk up her inability to tell any kind of story that makes any kind of sense or sounds any kind of remotely plausible to the trauma of her ordeal. I'm just not buying it because she remembers details that bolster her narrative, but she conveniently forgets the details that are inconvenient. But the most inconvenient one is the most damning, and that's the fact that Jason was shot in the back. I just wish the detectives didn't expect that fact to carry this case. I understand why they did, but their lack of digging deeper into Rebecca's statements really bothers me, since she would only serve 2 years for what she did to Jason, the father of 3 girls and a stepdaughter. Only 42 years old. I just have a hard time getting over that. I'm sure she has, though. I'm sure she's doing just hunky-dory, happy-go-skippy, living her best life right now. At least she's alive to live it. Well, Rebecca claimed that Jason said that he was going to jail tonight, insinuating, or she wants us to insinuate, along with her, that he was going to kill her and he was going to be headed to jail because of that. Yet, she somehow couldn't remember what he said right after he said that. All she could come up with, "I don't know what he said. I just know it was not nice." That's all. "I'm going to jail and blah, blah, blah. Say things, words that are not nice, blah, 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 blah." That's all she's got. And it's going to happen a few more times when Rebecca's going to put a story out there and fail to be able to create any real details around it. And I say create because she's making this up as she goes along, obviously. Otherwise, she'd have the whole story laid out, word for word, moment by moment, if it actually happened. The best that she could come up with was, "I don't even know what he said. I know it was not nice, you know, like, you're a piece of whatever. I don't know." That's a quote. But she says that. "I don't even know what he said. I know it was not nice, you know, like, you're a piece of whatever. I don't know." Rebecca had to have known in the moment that she said all this bullshit just how lame and unbelievable she sounded. He's got her on the ground, saying things to her that were not nice. That's the best that she could really come up with. I could sit here and come up with 10 different things to say about how I feel regarding Rebecca based purely on what happened between the two of them. She could have sat there and said, and he was yelling at me and he was like, "You dumbass bitch, who the F do you think you are? We got one date night and you got to go and F up the whole night. You're a piece of shit. You're a piece of shit wife. You're a piece of shit mom. Ain't even about shit to begin with. Embarrassing me in public. Can't frickin' take you anywhere without you causing a effing scene every single frickin' time. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of you. You piece of whatever. I can't even find the words that are vomit inducing enough to describe your stupid ass. Then you have the nerve to go into my truck, go through my shit, stick your stupid ugly ass nose attached to your stupid ugly ass face into my vehicle and take my cigarettes like you run everything around here in this house, and then you break them in half and throw them in the trash. Who the frickin' and the holy fuck's sake do you think you are? Yeah, I hope I go to jail tonight, bitch. I hope I go to jail. At least I'll be the fuck away from you. Yeah, it's easy to talk shit, right? It's actually kind of fun. I never get to talk to anybody like that. At least not since I've been divorced. It's easy to talk like that to somebody when you have so much hatred and anger towards someone. The person who physically abuses someone can be very verbally abusive too. I've had a tremendous amount of venting that I needed to do over the years related to my ex-husband and my mother, that I really feel like I could sit here for hours and talk shit on both of them. I have very intense feelings about that. I do it in my podcast. I've been talking shit here on Rebecca for what? A couple of hours? And I'm literally only 16 minutes and 38 seconds into this hour and 36-minute long video. I actually don't even know how I'm going to get through this at this rate. I'm hoping that I somehow miraculously start picking up the pace soon, as this is obviously going to be turning into more than 2 or 3 episodes. I'll try to squeeze it into 4 parts. That's my goal. I just needed to call this lady out on all her stuff, you know? I needed to, literally. I had to get this off my chest. Otherwise, I was going to explode. Anyway, getting back to it. After Rebecca says, I don't even know what he said. I know it was not nice, you know, like you're a piece of whatever. I don't know. And then she giggled again when she said that, because it is kind of funny how bullshitty all this sounds, to be honest. It's hilarious to me. So it's got to be somewhat comical to her as well. Otherwise, she wouldn't be giggling, right? Giggling in the face of having just shot her husband a few hours earlier. Yeah, that's totally normal, right? Shoot your spouse and go talk to the police and try to save your ass, and it's all funny, haha, good times, right? So next, Rebecca says, and then he said he was going to end it. And he went back to the bedroom, and I thought he meant he was going to kill me. Let me yawn for a minute as I think about that for a sec. She thought that he was going to kill her. Right. Okay. So the detectives who could give a shit were questioning her about where she was standing and where Jason was standing in proximity to each other when they were in the room, especially at the moment that she shot Jason. This is important to them. They want to make sure what she says lines up with the evidence that they're going to find at the scene or did find at the scene. So as Rebecca begins to go through this part of the story, these investigators are going to want her to get really specific about where Jason was when she actually shot him. And she's going to get pretty vague and do a lot of distancing around this. I know, it's shocking, but it's actually quite similar to the way Teresa Stone was when it came to using guns. Both of these women just relied on ignorance and denial about knowing how to really use a gun. Teresa Stone insisted that she was afraid of guns and stayed away from them at all costs. Here, Rebecca is going to repeatedly say that she never shot a gun before. She's going to distance herself using a variety of ways that she interacted with the gun without outright saying that she did what she did. It's really strange how she described what she did with her gun after she grabbed it. But then later on, she's going to admit to shooting him in ways that are so incriminating. It makes you wonder if she just forgot that she was trying to get out of a murder charge and just let some actual truth slip out accidentally. After Rebecca emotionally described thinking that Jason was going to kill her after he let her go and said that he was going to end it. Rebecca stated, quote, "So I went into my office where I keep my gun and I grabbed my case, my little case, and I opened it. I've never shot that gun ever." That will be the first time she says that. And she's going to say it repeatedly, and we're going to keep count. The detective asked where the gun case was at, and she replied, "It's probably on my daughter's bed." He asked, "Where was it in the office?" She replied, "In my little cabinet, my file cabinet. I keep it there because I work in there normally. My daughter's home, so she's taking over my office. I've been in the living room. You know, I can't work in there right now, but that's where I stay, and I'm home a lot during the day, and I get weirdos that come up to the house. So I'm an adjuster. I go out on claims, and I've been meaning to get my concealed weapons license, and I actually gotten this gun like 6 months ago. I had bought this gun." Now here, dreamers, Rebecca is going to begin talking about some troubles in the marriage, particularly around the time that she purchased the gun, which to me sounds a little like planning. But if she was to have been afraid of him and the marriage was on the rocks for whatever reason, then perhaps she did have a reason to want to protect herself. I just don't know how much of what she's saying is actually true, you know? There doesn't seem to be any explanations as to why their marriage was going through so many of these rough patches to a point that she had to buy a gun. She never really seemed to say that they were having problems. She'll talk about how they were separated for a while, how they went to marriage counseling, but never any reasons why. All we know is she says the marriage was rocky and she was deathly afraid of him. That's all we know. Now, I will say from personal experience that there's something to be said about being on the receiving end of being cheated on. In all the years from the time that I started this podcast, I never talked about it. But my ex-husband cheated on me starting from around 2008, and it never stopped. But I chose to be in denial about it. I never talked about it. I never acknowledged it. I didn't want to, because in my own mind, the minute that I gave it any sort of validity, that would make it real. So I went on for 12, 13, 14 years just acting like it didn't happen. And a part of that was not sharing that with anybody in my life, and including the show. And you'll probably, some of you, be surprised to hear that I've opened up about it more now since it's all over with. But he cheated on me rampantly throughout all the years. So if that puts a little bit of context around why things happen the way that they happen between he and I, then now you have a little bit more understanding. Because from 2017 on is when you all got to know me, and not one time ever in any of those episodes, and 300 episodes plus on here, and I don't know how many episodes on Patreon, at one time did I ever say our problem was his infidelity. But that's all it was, is he couldn't keep his dick in his pants. It was constant. I've got calls from women like on a regular basis. And now what's even scarier, and it terrifies me as to what's going on out there now, is that, you know, after we put him through college and he put me through bullshit, we split up, and he actually managed to get a job as a licensed teacher, an educator here in Nevada. This guy who did that to me for years, year after year after year, woman after woman after woman, now is a high school teacher here in Nevada, in Las Vegas. Yeah, right up the street from me, actually. It's horrifying when I think about it. Just simply horrifying. The kind of disgusting human beings that this school district will hire. But now that I've put that out there, I want to say that the reasons why Rebecca and Jason had marital problems are a mystery to me. I don't know why she's not talking about it, but I know why I didn't talk about it. And if I had to guess, I think her problem here is that he probably cheated on her a lot. And she just doesn't want to admit to it because that makes her look bad. And it's embarrassing for her and humiliating. I think she had to come up with some other excuse because I really don't see any other reasons why she would want to shoot him in the back outside of adultery. And I think that's why she's storming out of restaurants, getting mad when he's talking to other people. Maybe he was flirting with someone at the Outback, storming out to the car, fighting, and they're driving on the interstate. She's controlling, searching his vehicle. Was she really looking for cigarettes or was she looking for evidence? Something triggered this woman. And if she would have just admitted to that, I can sympathize. But she's not. She's trying to get away with it. I don't believe adultery to be a petty thing at all. And I could even understand wanting to see your husband shot in the back. I could see it rising to that level of hatred and anger and violence. But she's not given us anything but cigarettes and a little bit of a dust up at the Outback. Anyway, as I was saying, Rebecca is going to begin talking about some troubles in the marriage, particularly around the time that she purchased the gun, which, like I said, it sounds like planning. But if she was to have been afraid of him and the marriage was on the rocks for whatever reasons, and I suspect it was adultery, then I'm not so convinced that this was all about protecting herself. It's just, I don't know how much of what she's actually saying is true. There just doesn't seem to be any other explanations as to why their marriage was going through these rough patches. She never seemed to say why they were having the problems. She talked about separating for a while, that they went to counseling, but never the reasons why. All we know is that the marriage was rocky and she claims to be afraid of him. But from what I just told you, I suspect he was cheating. And those are reasons to go to counseling. Those are reasons to separate. Because think about it. Someone who is committing acts of domestic violence against their intimate partner, they're not going to want to go to counseling. They're not going to want to open up and share about this stuff. They're not going to want to separate because the domestic violence perpetrator wants as much control over the target of their violence as possible. They're not going to want to leave. But the person who's cheating will go through the counseling just to go through the motions, and they will happily separate and go live at their parents' house or go crash at a friend's house because they want a break. And that's going to open up time for them to do some more fooling around. If he's cheating, she's going to want to go to the counseling, but she's definitely not going to want him out of the house, for sure. But she has to make this about being afraid of him. But the more I talk about this and the more I hear and the more I think about it, I'm really starting to lean in on this being about adultery. But Rebecca's not going to bring that up. So we're just going to assume that she's telling the story that she wants to put out there. So the reasons why she has the gun is because she's afraid of him, but she's also afraid of being at home, and she's also afraid of being out in the field doing her job. As for the weirdos coming up to her door, this was back in 2013. I don't know. Like I said, I think she's making this stuff up, but let's just humor her, okay? Throughout my life, it's like it used to be normal for people to come knocking at your door. Nowadays, it seems like people don't come up to your door randomly like they used to, like door-to-door salespeople. That's a thing of the past. Even 13 years ago when this case took place, it just doesn't feel like something that happened, She said, I'm home a lot during the day and I get weirdos that come up to the house. Maybe she does. This is Florida, you know, panhandle area. She sounds super southern. I really don't know what it's like in the South because I've never lived there, but it seems like a trespassers are gonna get shot type of vibe, you know? Maybe I'm stereotyping and speaking outside of my lane here, but I don't feel like I grew up around anyone who answered the door armed. And when you're at home alone during the day, and if you work from home, that seems like the safest place in the world to be, really. Not in our world of true crime. People get shot when they're home all the time by their spouses. It happens quite frequently in these stories that we listen to and watch. At least it's safe as long as you make it safe though at home. I feel secure at home. I'm here right now all day by myself. I'm not worried about there were weirdos at the door and what happened? They left packages and my dogs barked. That's it. I don't have a gun. I don't have an alarm. And I'm not saying that Amazon drivers are weirdos. I was just using her terminology. I don't even have an alarm on the house, but I live upstairs. I have a Ring doorbell. I have barky dogs, and that's enough for me to feel comfortable in my home. I got 3 packages delivered as I was recording. That's why my dogs were barking. Even before I had the Ring camera, if there was someone at the door that I didn't know or wasn't expecting, the dogs are so loud, I just wouldn't open the door. But either way, all of that's to say, I believe Rebecca needed a story and a reason to explain the purchase of the gun that doesn't seem like Jason's shooting was a well-laid plan. She will say that she has weirdos at the door. She will say that because she's a claims adjuster and she's out on the road in precarious situations, that she felt like she needed to have a concealed carry permit. But she will also say that she was afraid of Jason when they were separated because he would sneak into the house, which seems like another thing that an abuser wouldn't resort to. I think he would bombard his way into the house. I think he would come and go as he pleased. I think he's not going to be locked out of the house. He's not going to have to sneak in. An abuser is way too controlling to behave that way, to me anyway. If he were going to sneak in, it would be to kill her, not to come in and get all lovey-dovey, which is what she says he does. He comes into the house, he sneaks in, and he's all kissing on me, scaring me half to death. That's what she says later on. It's freaking hilarious. But anyway, all of Rebecca's reasons that she's telling us for getting a gun, make a little bit of sense to an extent, but I don't know. However, why all of a sudden now, at this point in her life, with all of those daughters in the house, with her career that she has been involved in for many, many years, and supposedly being abused by her husband, and suddenly she decided to go out and get a gun out of the blue after not ever having one before, and all of a sudden feeling like she needed one, just 6 months later, she uses it to shoot her husband to death? That's a lot to try to believe, and frankly, I just don't. Now here, after Rebecca said that she'd been meaning to go get her concealed license, she said, and I had actually gotten this gun like 6 months ago. I had bought this gun, and my husband and I were separated at the time, and he was living with his mama, and he kept coming into my house in the middle of the night, and he was coming in the house, and he was like, he'd wake me up, hugging on me, scared me half to death. And I was just like, what the heck? Rebecca paused numerous times throughout this part of her statement, but she still wasn't receiving any kind of reaction or comment from the detectives. So since she wasn't getting anything that she wanted out of them, she decided to revert back to bringing her children back into the scene to see if that elicits any kind of interest in what she's having to say. But the detectives are in such a deep state of not giving a crap mode that I don't even think that they're capable of reacting anymore. I just think that they're in there asking questions in order to just say that they asked her questions. So, like I said, she wasn't getting anything out of the detectives. She's telling them that Jason was sneaking into the house and scaring her by hugging her, because that's tremendously violent. So, because she's getting nothing, she decides to throw her daughter back into the story. And she said, he'd wake me up, hugging on me, scared me half to death. And I was just like, what the heck? He'd wake up my daughter Emma in the middle of the night. Emma's the second oldest, the one who's a mid teenager around the age of 15 or so. So, because it's clear that these detectives don't give a shit about what she's saying when it comes to Jason coming in and hugging her, sneaking in and stuff like that, she decides, well, maybe they'll react if he's doing it to my daughter, waking her up. But they're not biting. So here, Rebecca has told these detectives all the reasons why she needed to buy a gun. She feels unsafe and threatened just by being inside her own home during the day, random weirdos coming up to the house, and now her husband being one of those randos just walking up into her house, letting himself in. She literally said the guy's coming into her house, hugging on her, and it scared her. And he kept doing it. All he would do is come in and hug her, and he kept doing it, she said, over and over, all the time. He's coming in to hug her. So after a few times, if it truly scared her half to death, why didn't she put a stop to it? And why didn't she tell him or put a lock on the door, keep him out? She's not taking any of these steps or precautions. Why? Because he's not doing anything. I seriously doubt if he's coming over, he's probably coming over just normally if they are truly separated. Maybe he's being nice because he's trying to make up for his infidelity. That would make sense to me. My ex-husband constantly begged for forgiveness. It was constant. It was like a broken record refrain because it happened so much. He's not coming in threatening her. He's not choking her. He's not beating her. He's not trying to have sex with her. Well, maybe if he was really hugging on her, but he might be trying to make up with her and have some intimacy. But it actually almost sounds kind of sweet what he's doing. She obviously hasn't barricaded herself inside the house. He can still let himself in just to come in and hug her. And all this scared her half to death. I mean, come on, dreamers. If your husband or boyfriend did something like that and he felt like it was an affectionate gesture, like approaching you while you're sleeping to hug you, and it startles you so much that it scares you half to death, don't you think that he would be like, okay, I won't do that again. I won't sneak up on you. I get it. I don't think he or any guy is going to want to knowingly approach a sleeping woman to startle her awake. He might end up with a swift kick to the groin. You know, she might start swinging on him, and he's not going to want that if he's scaring his wife. No husband wants to purposely scare their wife, you know? I mean, unless it's for fun or for a practical joke, but you know what I mean. Especially because he's got daughters in the house too. If he's scaring his wife, he's going to think, well, maybe I'm scaring my girls too. And he certainly doesn't want to do that. Make your kids feel scared and unsafe in their homes in the middle of the night. It doesn't sound like Jason or any dad would ever want to make his girls feel that type of way. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think the abuser would be the one to go and stay with his mama. If you look up reasons why husbands abuse their wives, you'll find the top reasons are for power and control. There can be a combination of factors, but the bottom line is mostly there's something that happened which caused the abuser to become increasingly angry towards their spouse or to just lose trust in them. Whatever that something is, they've decided that they're going to take control in order to prevent her from doing whatever it was that caused him to be upset or mistrust her. And then it just escalates from there. What I do not think an abuser is going to do is give up control over his family, his wife, or his house by leaving to go live with his mama. And this can go both ways for the wife to be the abusive one. And I'm just using Jason as the example for this story. But if anything, I think Rebecca was more of the abuser. And if nothing else, it was mutual. When the story doesn't add up, when the surviving spouse can't tell a straight narrative if their life depended on it, I usually start to think that they're the one that's abusive, not the other way around. So, if the reasons for the husband and the wives to resort to physical abuse when dealing with their partners had to do with power and control, I do not believe for a second that the abuser would voluntarily leave the home. That actually sounds like the opposite of every goal a domestic abuser has, to keep a stronghold on their spouse, their family, and their home. They're not going to voluntarily walk away from the very things that they're trying to lord over. For the majority of cases we've seen with abuse going on in the background, the only way the spouse will ever leave the home and the target of their abuse and the control over the house is by force, by court order, or by police, either telling them to go away for the night or taking them into custody. The abuser is not going to be leaving on his own volition. I don't believe that would have happened by any other way other than force, or if Jason's mommy made him do it, which I highly doubt. The bottom line is I believe that this couple had troubles in their marriage. I don't know the real reasons why things were so bad, but they were. And all I really see thus far is a whole bunch of aggressive and controlling behavior on Rebecca's part, and Jason really taking actions to put distance and space between them. And if he's really coming in the middle of the night to hug her, I feel like that's his way of trying to make up because of his cheating. If I'm right, I see him to resorting to things like walking away, leaving a volatile situation to get himself a pack of cigarettes, calm down. He could have left to go. Maybe he smokes with his girlfriend. That makes sense. He seems to be the one always leaving. And that's exactly the way that my ex-husband was. He was always willing to go. He would happily go stay with his mom just to get the fuck away from me because I was not putting up with this. I fought him tooth and nail every step of the way. And yeah, I wanted to know where he was at, what he was doing. I wanted locations, but everything that came out of his mouth was a lie. He kept his phone next to him as if it was life and death. He hid so much from me. He refused to share locations with me. He refused to let me look at his phone. The only ways I ever found out were when I got calls from other women, or if he accidentally left his phone going, like there was a video playing and he fell asleep. Then I had access to his phone. And sure as shit, message after message after message. I'm separated. I don't have a girlfriend. We're getting divorced. All of it. I saw all the messages, but I had to sneak my way into. I was that person. In a lot of ways, I was Rebecca, except I didn't shoot him. I wanted to. He just wasn't worth it. And that's because he was worthless. And he probably still is. Just imagine him working as a teacher in high school. Makes me want to vomit. And I'm not insinuating that there's anything inappropriate or untoward going on that, my husband working as a teacher and his inability to not have adulterous affairs, those things are, one has nothing to do with the other. It's about character and integrity. And those are qualities that you would want in a teacher. And he's such a piece of shit that if that were part of, the prerequisites to become a teacher, he would never get hired. Back to the story here. All I see going on here is Jason resorting to things like walking away, leaving this volatile situation. Like I said, getting himself a pack of cigarettes to calm himself down, him leaving the home to give each other room, yet still coming around, perhaps with nothing but love and gestures of affection. But Rebecca here, she keeps trying to say that he's the abuser. He's the shit talker. He's the problem. And ultimately, he's the one that deserved to die. There's nothing about what she did that night in shooting him that she will ever express at any point in this interview that she regretted, that she had to shoot him. There's never a time when she says that she wished that it didn't have to come to that. She never once shed a tear for this man's life. The only thing Rebecca does is find excuses and reasons and justifications for what she did. She reiterates over and over again how much she feared for her life. And over again, she says that she did what she did because she thought that he was going to kill her. I think she knows trying to prove that he was a threat with bullets fired into his back is a tough story to sell. So I think she's told herself to stick to the same mantra. I thought he was going to kill me, and just keep saying it over and over, and it shall manifest. And in a way, it did. Anyway, getting back to Rebecca's interview, the last thing she said, was that Jason was coming into the house in the middle of the night 6 months earlier while they were separated, scaring her and waking up her daughter. She said, he'd wake up my daughter Emma in the middle of the night and I was just scared. The detective asked, is that why you bought the gun? She replied, that's why I bought the gun. And then I had actually been thinking about buying a gun, a little gun in case I'm out on the road. I mean, I do call outs. I do claims. I do y'all's claims. I'm a Crawford adjuster, you know. I'm out on the highway. I do trucking accidents and they leave. And when they leave, I'm still there doing accident investigations. I mean, I've been in some shady spots. And they don't give a shit because they next asked, how long have y'all been back together? Rebecca replied, we've been together for over a year. Now there is an inconsistency since she just said that she got the gun 6 months ago when they were separated. But now she's saying they were back together for about a year. So it doesn't line up with her statement that she got the gun while they were separated because of the way that he was behaving and sneaking into the house, scaring her to death with all this hugging he was doing. Rebecca was getting called out on that when she was asked, quote, but after you said he would have split up and was living at his mother's house, well, Rebecca had the chance to now fix her inconsistency, which she took and said, you know, I had said I bought that gun 6 months ago, but it was before he moved back to the house, so it's been over a year. He came back around 4th of July last year, and we'd been in therapy. So Rebecca here has officially told a major inconsistency. And I think she realized her acquiring the gun happened way too close in proximity to the shooting. I also think she messed up by buying the gun 6 months after he moved back home, right? She needed to have purchased this gun more than a year ago, or more than a year earlier. But she actually didn't get it until he had been back in the home for 6 months. And that's not really lining up with her story here. And yeah, it looks pretty bad that after they've been married for 14 or 15 years and they separate about a year ago, and then 6 months after he comes back into the house, she buys a gun, and then 6 months after that, he's dead. It could be a coincidence, but I doubt it. So here Rebecca is claiming that during the course of their troubled and allegedly abusive marriage, they sought counseling. But she presented it in a way that would make it virtually impossible to prove whether or not they actually did. And I really don't understand why she framed it the way she did. But this is what she said. We've been in therapy. We were seeing a counselor for over a year, a marriage and family counselor off of 10 Mile. And the detective interrupted her to clarify. Let me back up real quick. 4th of July last year. So not the 4th of July we just had, but the one before. So it would have been 2012. That's when he moved back home that week because we have a condo, a timeshare on the 4th of July week. And he stayed that week and the kids were mad. They did not want us to get back together. And dreamers, I don't believe that for one hot second either. Her biological daughter may have not cared either way. She may have not liked the guy at all, but the other 3 girls were his. The oldest would have been about 14 or 15 or so the year prior, a little bit younger, maybe 13 or 14. The two youngest would have been under the age of 3. And here, she's putting it all on the 4 of them being the ones that don't want him to be around. Well, the detective once again didn't even acknowledge what she said and just moved on back to the scene of the shooting. I wish you would have expanded on that a little bit more and asked some questions about who was mad about him coming back for a family vacation on the 4th of July. Who was mad? What'd they say? Why'd they react that way? I would have challenged her to prove that. It's just a convenient way of making it seem like his absence was a welcome reprieve from all the terror that he rains on his wife and his girls, right? Rebecca will eventually say that she believed that he would 100% shoot her and all the kids to death if he wanted to. She'll say that in this interrogation at some point. And that is quite an accusation to make against a man who, at the time, was laying on an operating table fighting for his life after she shot him in the back. She shot him in the back, but he's the one who would, without hesitation, murder her and their 4 daughters. She puts 3 bullets into him from behind, yet he's the one capable of quintuple murder. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So after ignoring what Rebecca just said about the girls being mad about their parents getting back together, yeah, I just imagine the 2 toddlers being so pissed off at seeing their dad, right? The detective skipped over all that and said, okay, so you went to the room, you retrieved your handgun, is that correct? Yes. Was it loaded? Yes. What happened? Rebecca replied, it was loaded. It was on a safety. Like I said, I have never even taken it to the range. I mean, never shot the gun. That's the second time that Rebecca has reiterated that. I've said before that when they repeat themselves, these suspects like this over and over again, I think that they think it makes it more true somehow. And she really puts the emphasis on never every time. And she continued, and I walked out of the room and I hit the trigger. So dreamers, I didn't know what hit the trigger meant. So when I looked it up, when someone says that they hit the trigger, it typically means they're making a firm decision to take action, especially after a period of uncertainty or hesitation. This idiom conveys the idea of making a decisive choice that has significant consequences, similar to the action of pulling a trigger on a gun, which releases energy with precision. It often implies that the decision is final and irreversible, referencing the commitment to a chosen course of action. So someone who I've never shot that gun, I've never taken it to the range, she's trying to claim all this ignorance about gun handling, but yet she uses the terminology pretty well because I didn't know what hit the trigger meant. Anyway, so again, we see that Rebecca chooses her words very, very carefully, as she made this sound like there was a period of time where she deliberated over whether or not to take action as it relates to firing the gun, following a period of uncertainty or hesitation. So she did have time to deliberate. But at the same time, it still feels like distancing to me. So she said she walked out of the room, she hit the trigger, and nothing happened. The detective asked, where was he at when you hit the trigger? She replied, he was in the bedroom, in the closet. Did you hit the trigger on purpose? Well, I hit it to see what it would do. I never shot the gun, okay? Now that's 3 times that she said that. And I thought it was on safety. I haven't looked at it in a while. I hit it and it didn't work. Then I saw the safety trigger and I clicked it and I shot the gun. It shot in the dining room at the wall to the left, well, like towards the bathroom area. And I was like, okay, it's working. So I walked down the hall and he was digging in the closet and I thought he was looking for the gun. And cue up some emotions here. And he started hollering at me, oh no, you're not, whatever. And I shot him. Okay, can we stop here for a moment and talk about what complete and utter bullshit that entire statement that she just made actually is? Imagine this whole scenario in your head. Rebecca is in this physical altercation with her husband. He's choking her for quite a while, according to her own words, okay? He lets up on her, he lets her go, and he heads into the bedroom to go digging in the closet in order to end it. In that amount of time, Rebecca manages to go and retrieve her handgun that she has for protection, conveniently kept in her office, in the very room where she said her oldest daughter had been staying, and I have a huge problem with that. She's got kids home for the summer. She's got her daughter staying in the room. Her daughter has company over. She's got another teenage daughter in the house, and she's got company over too. And the two younger children, under the age of 4, yet she has the gun right there in her file cabinet for her to grab. She even said that she hadn't been working in her office. She didn't say that she kept the gun in a locked cabinet. She just said she got the gun from her little file cabinet, but then mentioned she keeps it in there since she works there during the day. But don't you think if your daughter's going to be staying in the room and having guests over, that you would make sure that you would have your gun in your bedroom or out of reach for the time being? I don't know. I've never had a loaded gun and young children in the house. But a cabinet is hardly a safe place with 4 children in the house, one of them being a teenager and the two others under the age of 4. I don't believe Rebecca kept that gun there for an entire year just like that. And if she did, she would have had it in a safe or at the very least in a locked box. I've even gotten to the point where I'm pretty sure that Jason was not aware of the fact that Rebecca even had a gun. If he were an abuser, then I would strongly suspect that Rebecca, as the alleged victim of his abuse, would keep that a closely guarded secret. I don't think Jason knew she had a gun at all. And it's even likely and most likely that her kids didn't even know she had a gun either. And because of that, I think that's why she felt comfortable keeping it in that cabinet right there, because they didn't know about it. That would have been something that she wouldn't want Jason to find out about either, right? So she would have to hide it from her kids too. And that lessens the probability even more that she would have left that gun in a file cabinet in her office/guest bedroom when her daughter was home visiting. That being said, I strongly believe the only person aware of the existence of that gun was Rebecca. I believe she kept it hidden away from everyone until that day. And I think she planted it there in advance of the confrontation she was planning on having with Jason so that it would be easy for her to retrieve when she was good and ready to shoot him. And when she found the opportunity, she did exactly that. Shot him in the back when he wasn't looking and had no idea what was about to happen. And when we get to more of the details about what Jason was doing in the closet, supposedly, I think you'll be further convinced that Rebecca 100% set Jason up in order to murder him. And dreamers, tell me, how bullshitty was this whole mess about hitting the trigger, taking the safety off and shooting it into the wall? I mean, really? She wants us to believe all of the following: that she would sit there and mess with the gun that she claimed to have absolutely no experience firing, with 2 young children aged 4 and under right there down the hallway from her. She even said that her 4-year-old JC came out and saw them fighting. So she knows at least one of them is up and out and about. Yet she's going to sit there and mess with the safety and mess with the trigger and accidentally discharge it into the dining room wall towards the bathroom? She might not even realize what she's saying here. She really should have been charged with discharging a weapon inside an occupied home and child endangerment. Anything else they could throw at her. This woman would have had her kids taken away from her for just that. Yet she wants us to believe that the only reaction she had to accidentally firing the gun into the wall was then saying, "Okay, well, it's working." That's it? Didn't she startle or stun herself? She never shot the gun before, right? Yet she didn't scare the shit out of herself or anyone else in the house for that matter, especially Jason. She wants us to believe that he did not react to this at all. He just kept digging in the closet, ignoring the fact that a gun was just discharged inside the house. The sound of that would have scared everyone, including herself, her kids, Jason, maybe even some neighbors. Jason would have been like, "What the fuck was that?" And if he was really going for his gun, he would have grabbed it if he could have, or he would have fled. I really don't know. Honestly, But I don't think he would have kept digging in the closet like she said he was, because that's exactly what she said happened. She said, I was like, okay, it's working. So I walked down the hall. Yeah, casually, right? Just walk down the hall, all like it's a walk in the park, right? And he was digging in the closet, and I thought he was looking for the gun, and he started hollering at me, oh no, you're not, whatever. And I shot him. Literally her words. That's what she said. Oh no, you're not, whatever. And I shot him. Just seconds after discharging the gun in another room, she strolls up the hall. He says, oh no, you're not, whatever. And I shot him. That's it. That's how this all went down. Yeah. Bullshit. So after Rebecca told the detectives, he said, oh no, you're not, whatever. They asked if she knew where she shot him at. Of course, this woman is never going to admit that she shot him in the back. And, oh, I was right. She replied, well, I just shot because I never shot it before, for the fourth time. I never shot it before other than that one walk in before I walked back in there. Rebecca's referring to the shot that she claimed to have fired off when she was testing the trigger and the safety. Most people fire a warning shot. Some accidentally discharge a bullet, but not old Rebecca here. She fires a test shot inside her house with young children in dangerously close proximity that nobody even batted an eye at. I mean, even the most profoundly deaf people nearby would react to a gunshot. Completely deaf people will feel the sounds of gunfire in the form of physical feelings, a vibration, a shock wave, or even pressure traveling through the air or on the ground. They'll feel it with their feet, especially in an enclosed place like a family home. And a particularly experienced deaf person, which sounds kind of strange, but I'm sure it takes time and practice to distinguish the various concussive forces and vibrations that different sounds create. But a particularly experienced deaf person would even possibly be able to distinguish between different types of guns. But anyway, that was way too much information for a joke that I cracked about the apparent lack of reaction everybody seemed to have to Rebecca supposedly firing off her weapon inside a house. I don't know when she fired that shot into the wall. She claimed that that was the very first time she ever fired the gun. I mean, let's say it all together, right? She never, ever, ever fired that gun, right? But I don't think she did it right before she went and shot Jason, because I think he would have reacted in a different way aside from just sitting there continuing to dig in the closet. There's just no way I'm going to believe a gunshot went off inside the house and he was just like, ho hum, just looking for my stuff. No, didn't happen. How did it actually happen? I don't know. Did she accidentally discharge the gun in there? Possibly, but I certainly don't think that it happened in the sequence in which she described. So Rebecca's statement carried on. She next said, quote, and then I don't know if I hit him or not, but I imagine I did because he fell. But then he started coming after me because I hit him on his side, I guess. Okay, so she literally just said 5 different things in one sentence to avoid admitting to anything at all. 1, I don't know if I hit him or not. 2, I imagine I did because he fell. 3, he started coming after me. 4, I hit him on his side. And 5, I guess. That's actually quite impressive considering how much she said about shooting Jason without at all saying with any type of definitiveness or certainty that she shot him. The detective asked what side. Rebecca thought for a second, to make sure that her bullet holes line up with the holes in her story. She next said, I don't. He was facing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I know he was in the closet. His closet is on the left side, which is the door opens, is behind it. And honestly, And I just love it when these people say, honestly. And honestly, I don't remember. And in this case, I don't remember is code for I don't want to admit to anything incriminating. That's what that is. So here, Rebecca says something that is another distancing tactic, and it's so obvious if you catch it. After she said, and honestly, I don't remember, Rebecca stated, I just remember. I know you ended up with his head this way. And then she motioned to her right. She is literally telling these officers who had been at the scene of the shooting that they ended up with her husband's head pointed in a certain direction, as if these detectives showed up at her house as a result of Jason being shot, and during the course of their investigation, they were the ones to somehow take complete and total responsibility for the state of the crime scene and all of the evidence and all of the facts. So in effect, the position, the state of Jason's mortally wounded body was now theirs to deal with. At least that's how I interpret that statement. Because what in the holy dead husbands would cause her to word something in that manner in which she did? In directly talking to these two detectives, she literally said, I know you ended up with his head this way. It would have been strange if she had said that she ended up with his head this way. The normal thing to say would be to attribute the placement of Jason's head when he was shot and fell to the ground to himself. He was the one that fell and landed with his head in the direction that it was, technically. Maybe Rebecca even thought that was still bringing herself too close to being accountable for putting Jason's head that way. So how I see it, technically, it's Jason's deal, which way he landed and fell. But technically, this is all Rebecca. Either way, whichever way you cut it, I just love how stupidly she said that. Oh, and Rebecca, being the worst gift giver that kept on giving, she goes and does it again in her next sentence. The detective asked her, do you know how many times you shot him? Rebecca replied, I know I shot at least twice on him. Now, this isn't so much of a big deal to me because she just said a few moments ago that she shot him, but she definitely rolled back on that statement when she said she shot at least twice on him. I'm also going to take into consideration that perhaps in the South, with these folks that have these really strong Southern accents, that they word things in that way. Maybe people down there say I shot on him instead of I shot him. It might be a mix-up of prepositions for English learners, but this broad's a red-blooded American. The only thing that I can excuse away her grammar or lack thereof would be her being from the South. And I'm not even saying that's a grammar issue. It's just the way things are spoken. I don't know. It just sounds like she's trying to distance herself from having to say she shot him by saying, I shot at least twice on him. The next thing she says is, because I know that I wasn't sure if the first one hit him and the second one, I saw it come. It was on his head. Again, you see how she mixes up her prepositions? To me, it's her trying to stay as far away from anything that connects her to being the shooter. I shot on him twice. The first one hit him. The second one, I saw it come. It was on his head. She's all over the place except how it really happened. She's literally saying the bullet came on his head. The bullet came on his head. Like the bullet just waltzed right up to Jason and was like, hey, I'm coming towards your head. The detective can't even muster an ounce of any kind of reaction. He's so monotone and really barely able to put any sort of interest or feeling into what he's saying as he next asks, totally deadpan, okay, the second time you saw was on his head? Is that where you were pointing it, or is that... And he trailed off and Rebecca cut him off and said, I Honestly, I just pointed the gun and shot. I didn't know. The detective asked, was he on the ground at that time or was he standing up? Rebecca replied, no, he was coming towards me. Did he have anything in his hand or anything like that? Or could you even? No, he was shoving the door. Okay, so he didn't have anything in his hands? He was in the closet when I first, and that was it. She didn't even bother to finish her sentence with whatever it was she was going to say she first did. Probably shoot him. Finish that sentence with those words. He was in the closet when I first shot him. That's where she was going to go, but she stopped herself from saying it. She just doesn't want to admit it, but she will a few times actually throughout this interview. Since Rebecca stopped herself dead in mid-sentence, I can only assume that she was about to admit to something potentially incriminating. I believe she was about to say he was in the closet when I first shot him, like I had just said, but she didn't finish. Instead, she finished it like this. He was in the closet when I first, which is where he keeps his gun. He has a 9mm, and he's threatened me with that before. Completely ignoring Rebecca's statement that she had been threatened with a gun in the past, the detective completely blew past her statement and asked, but when you shot him the first time, he started coming at you, right? Yes. Did he have anything? No. But honestly, he is not a weak person either. Yeah. She wants to make sure that everybody understands that he doesn't have to have a gun in his hands for his hands to be weaponized. To that, the detective replied, oh, I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to picture what you saw, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And you think you just, and now after you shot him the second time, you saw that one hit him in the head? Rebecca started up with, rasping up her voice again with that vocal fry, with her dramatics and her emotions. And I saw blood on his head. So she won't even admit that she shot him in the head. The only thing she's willing to say is that she saw blood on his head. Well, duh, you shot him. It's kind of par for the course. When somebody gets shot in the head, you're probably going to see blood on the head. Not only that, dreamers, I want you to remember that she said this, that after she shot him, as he was coming towards her, it was then she saw the blood on his head. Now, that's kind of vague enough for a good attorney to be able to dance around it, right? But there are two fundamental problems that Rebecca is going to have to reconcile when it comes time to facing the music for killing her husband. One is the fact that Jason was shot in the back. If Jason was coming at her when she shot him, he would have had to have been walking backwards towards her, and that simply doesn't make any sense unless Jason has taken some sort of crazy backwards training and fighting, that this is the posture that you take when you're coming after somebody, walk towards them backwards, I guess. I don't know. I can't think of any good reason to shoot somebody in the back unless you really want to murder them and do it as easy and simply as possible. Jason was in the closet in that enclosed space with his back turned towards his wife. And I do believe he was looking for something. Rebecca says he was looking for a gun. I have my own theory about what he was looking for, and it wasn't his gun, so he could have a duel to the death with his wife. And I will tell you what I believe and really what I almost know that he was looking for in that closet in part 3. Yes, we're going into part 3 after this. I'm about to end this one in just a moment because it's reached 2 hours and 24 minutes right now. So this is longer than the first part, but I've been blabbing and blabbing, and I just really miss recording, and I have a lot to say about this case, and it's been building up for a month. So I'm sorry, but it's going to be 2 more parts, which I'm hoping to get out in the next week or 2. But before I end it, I also want to tell you what the second fundamental problem there is with Rebecca's story here, in addition to the fact that she claimed Jason was coming at her with those darned magical JFK bullets that somehow ended up going into his back. And that is the fact that Jason was not standing when she put a bullet into his head. And I don't know this to be a fact because of the investigation or the autopsy. I don't have access to any of that official stuff. I know it to be fact because Rebecca is going to, at some point in this interview, admit to the fact that Jason was actually down on the ground when she shot him in the head. I'm not sure why she was so willing to admit to something so damning. I kind of think she didn't mean to in the moment, but it sort of happened accidentally, and she wasn't really realizing the magnitude of what she was saying. I think it dawned on her when the detectives reacted in a very, very stunned silence kind of way. And it was really painful those few seconds that after she said, when I shot him in the head, he was on the ground. They're silent for it feels like an eternity actually. And it's very, very uncomfortable. And we will get to that part all in the next episode. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in the story here. I was going to try to squeeze this into 3 parts. Maybe I'll be able to, but no promises. I think it might be 4. I would be able to do it in 3, probably even 2, if Rebecca wasn't being so weird, evasive, and dodgy with her answers. I guess none of us would even be here talking about it if she didn't just shoot her husband to death to begin with and just took responsibility for it. That would be the respectable thing to do, I guess. But anyway, I'll be back soon with hopefully the last 2 installments of the series. But like I said, I can't guarantee it, but I'm going to try my best. I should be able to do the rest of this in 4 hours. I don't even want to tell you what the timestamp is on the actual interrogation video. I feel like I'm rushing through this now. I feel like I was talking really fast and I'm still at 2 hours and 26 minutes now. So this is just getting absurd. I just want to get the story out soon because I've been slow getting content out there for you. And it's really important to me that I keep doing this. It really keeps me fulfilled. It keeps me grounded. It keeps my head on straight. It keeps me doing things that I wouldn't do if I didn't have this and if I didn't have you listening. So stay tuned for the next part of the series. This is the tale of Reading Between the Bullshit, the ridiculous interrogation of Rebecca Rogers. Boy, she's something else, isn't she? But anyway, that's it for today. I want to thank you all so much for taking the time to listen. And as always, take care, be safe, and sweet dreams.